It was the Halloween night of 2011 when I was out trick-or-treating with two of my close friends. For disclaimer purposes, I'll be using pseudonyms, as I like to keep the identity of everyone involved in this story anonymous. That being said, I'll go by the alias Mike. My friends will go by Tom and Jerry, respectively. We were all dressed as characters from my favorite childhood cartoons. I was dressed as Naruto, as that was my favorite anime. Tom was dressed as Goku from Dragon Ball Z. Jerry was dressed as Spider-Man, as he was a hardcore fan of the Tobey Maguire series that aired in the early 2000s. I remember us trick-or-treating for about a solid hour or two around the neighborhood. I could feel my legs get sore from all the relentless walking and strain from carrying my heavy sack of candy. My bag was starting to get full to the brim. My friends' bags were just as full, as they began carrying their sacks over their shoulders like they were Santa Claus delivering gifts on a Christmas evening. If I had $1 for every candy that was inside my bag, I would have definitely had enough to buy myself a new gaming console. Guys, can we go home?
Dude, don't give up yet. We still got room in our bags. Just 10 more minutes, man. You're just saying that because you're practically wearing a onesie made out of women's leggings. At least you don't have to wear this stupid wig on your head. Stop being such wimps. This day only comes once a year, so grow a pair and let's keep going.
Jerry began to make his way further down the street, while me and Tom looked at each other with a disdained look that screamed, "Let's get this over with quick." We then proceeded to walk towards Jerry's direction. I recall Jerry already standing in front of a house with his arms extending his bag towards the candy giver saying, "Trick or treat!" I also noticed this one trick-or-treater wearing a Jason Voorhees mask standing behind him. He was a tall and slim kind of guy who was either a really big kid or just an older man who didn't want to give up the trick-or-treating tradition. As we approached another house, Jerry said,
"Alright guys, just 2 more houses, then we can bounce."
The individual wearing the Jason mask casually inserts himself in the conversation and says,
"Would you guys mind if I trick-or-treat with you as well? I lost my friends and don't have my cell phone on me."
I personally didn't want this guy tagging along, as I was already done with the day and didn't need any further baggage prolonging the night. I casually make eye contact with Tom and Jerry while desperately trying to portray signals to not accept the guy's request. Jerry enthusiastically says,
"Yeah, sure, let's go."
Thanks, guys. You made my Halloween so much better.
We then proceeded to walk towards the next house while I began sulking under my breath saying, "Frickin' prick, since when was Jerry the shot caller?" After about several minutes of trick-or-treating, I could honestly say that I didn't mind his company, as he seemed like a nice guy and introduced himself as Jason. No pun intended. We eventually finished trick-or-treating and decided to call it a night. Myself, Tom, and Jerry say our farewells to Jason as he responds saying,
"It was nice meeting you guys. Just out of curiosity, whereabouts do y'all live? Maybe I can walk with y'all home."
Again, Jerry sporadically discloses the name of our street to him as me and Tom expressively show our disdain to Jerry for revealing such personal information.
Well, how ironic. I live around y'all's area too. You guys mind if I walk home with you?
Me and Tom remained silent as we made it pretty evident that we were upset at Jerry.
Dude, I don't think my friends want to go—
You guys look awfully tired. Just to make y'all feel better, I do know a shortcut if you're trying to avoid the long walk home.
Yeah, sure, dude.
Count me in, dude.
Where's it at? Jason then points his finger in the direction of an entrance of a forest preserve and says,
"We'd have to walk through there. There's a path that could get us home in about 10 minutes tops."
I'm gonna have to pass. I don't like deer, and I'm not trying to get eaten by a bear today.
Screw it, I'm going. Same. I want to get home faster, dude. Later, Jerry.
Me, Tom, and Jason begin making our way inside the forest, while Jerry casually hangs back to go to his alternate direction home. As we got deeper into the forest, Jason took out a flashlight from his candy bag and began to flash it towards the pathway ahead of us. Well, I wouldn't really call it a pathway, as the entire ground was covered in dirt, leaves, trees, and bushes scattered everywhere. I remember walking for about 10 minutes, but in reality, it felt like 30. His directions were precise and his voice was comprehensible.
I understood every instruction he was directing us to walk in, but couldn't digest why the walk was taking so long. I had completely ignored the fact that it was well over 10 minutes. For better context, me and Tom were leading the walk while Jason shined his flashlight from behind while giving out directions. Yo, are we there yet? My legs are freaking killing me, man. Dude, when are we gonna make it home? It's been like 20 minutes already.
We'll be arriving there in just a minute, boys.
As we began to walk further down the forest, I casually turned my head to glance at Jason, only to see him wearing his mask still, despite trick-or-treating being over with. I started to feel a little uncomfortable, and began questioning the guy's integrity by saying, "Dude, why are you still wearing your mask? And I'm starting to believe you're not leading us home."
Stop!
Jason then points at 2 shovels sitting on a small area of open dirt and says,
Both of you, pick up the shovels now!
Dude, what's going on? Jason then pulls out a long machete from the back of his pants and says,
Pick up those shovels and start digging a hole!
"What?
Do it, weeb!
Dude, please, just let us go!"
Pick up the shovel and start digging, Naruto! This is your last warning that I'm killing you both!
That's when me and Tom pick up the shovels and frantically start digging. In the back of my head, I was legitimately contemplating putting up a fight with this psycho, as it was 2 against 1 with the aid of the shovels. Unfortunately, I couldn't muster up the courage to put up a fight against him, as I didn't want to run the risk of mine or Tom's head getting chopped off. About 15 to 20 minutes later, me and Tom dug a hole big enough for the both of us to fit inside it. As we were about to make our way out of the hole, Jason shouts,
Don't move! Stay in the hole!
As he forcibly grabs both the shovels away from us while holding the machete against us. Jason then tucks the machete inside his pants, grabs one of the shovels, and begins burying us alive with the dirt we just dug out. I began to feel my vision getting blurry as the overwhelming amount of dirt he was tossing at us impaired my vision. "Please, I don't want to die. I'm too young for this. Please! Please, let us go! Why are you doing this? We're only kids!" All I remember thinking about in that moment was how a human could do such an inhumane act, and how I was literally going to share my remaining moments on Earth being buried alive with my best friend. I was at the point where I had already accepted death. I recall the taste of dirt and dead bugs going inside my mouth. The sensation of dirt hitting my skin was all I felt. That's when I heard a loud thud like he had just bashed Tom's brains out. I couldn't hear or feel any more dirt hitting the surface of my face. I rubbed my eyes to clear my vision, only to see Jason laying face down on the ground unconscious, with my other friend Jerry holding the shovel. Me and Tom then dig ourselves out of the hole and hop back to ground level. Despite surviving the catastrophe and being able to run away scot-free, I grabbed the machete from the back of Jason's pants. I then held him up by the forehead and began hacking at his neck, slicing and dicing repeatedly. I eventually decapitated his head while my entire Naruto costume was covered in blood. I remember seeing my friends nonchalantly watching me with a gaunt emotion, almost like my sadistic actions didn't even faze them. I then pushed his body into the hole as my friends began to collectively bury him. As outlandish as the story sounds, it was a true story that actually happened to me. I always wondered what heaven would be like if I was to die alongside my friend Tom that night. Jerry was initially supposed to head home, but decided to follow us as he saw the machete tucked in the back of Jason's pants. He began to directly follow behind our footsteps and unexpectedly witnessed the altercation go down. As we were getting buried alive, he used the opportunity to knock Jason out with the second shovel sitting behind him. I still don't know to this day if his remains were ever discovered. All I know is that I had a deadly conscious seep inside my head that night, but at the same time, a hint of satisfaction.
All I need to be happy is a rope to skip. I'm serious. I'll tell you why. Because a little jump rope can turn any bad situation into a real fun time. I learned this from the last time I went trick-or-treating. I'd spent the whole day perfecting my Harley Quinn costume, but the act just didn't feel complete until I picked up my jump rope and started skipping it. The backyard was my jump rope world championship stage, and everyone was thoroughly dazzled by my moves. Well, everyone except Kat. She came by a couple hours after sundown and immediately started cramping my style.
Come on, Tracy. Let's go trick-or-treating before all the good candy's gone. My name is Harley. Can't you see? Whatever, weirdo. Let's go. I'd rather stay here and skip rope all night. Your Catwoman costume isn't even good. It's enough for candy. I'm not crazy like you. So you only dressed up for candy? That's kind of lame. Well, it's also fun to just show off. You've got a point. I guess I'll go. Good. Now leave the rope. Harley Quinn doesn't skip rope. Fine.
That poser ended up dragging me all over the neighborhood that night. She took all of my candy, and when she got scared, she made me walk her all the way home. She lives an entire mile away from me, too. So inconsiderate. I never even told her what happened. I was walking home all alone super late that night, and I didn't even have my jump rope. What a drag. But then I noticed this older boy who was dressed as the Joker had come up behind me and started following me. I didn't recognize him. And all of the Jokers, he decided that Jared Leto was the way to go. Lame. I turned around and faced him.
Who are you?
Why, I'm the Joker, of course. Your one true love.
Why's that?
Don't you know? We're meant to be together. Harley Quinn always falls for the Joker.
Haven't you seen the new movie? I dumped you. You're gross.
That made him mad. This ain't the movie, sweetheart. I'm telling you, the Joker always gets his Harley Quinn. He then pulled out a knife. He swung at me, but I ran. I thought I'd outrun him, so I ran into the woods to cut across to my house. Boy, that was a bad idea. He caught up with me quick as soon as I got into the trees. He tackled me and pinned me down into the dirt. I screamed for help, but he put his hand over my mouth. Shh, baby girl. I'm just gonna give you a little reminder that you belong to me. So be happy about it. I thought I was going to die. He sliced my forehead with a smiley face, real slow. It hurt so bad, but I couldn't move anything at all. He was on top of me and held me down. But when the blood ran down into my eyes, I freaked. I squirmed and flailed until I got just one leg loose from his restraint. Then I kneed him straight in the balls with all my might. He fell back shouting and dropped his knife, holding his hand on his crotch. I picked up the knife before he could react, gripped it real tight, and then plunged it right into his stupid eyeball. Oh, how those screams were music to my ears.
No stopping now.
I thought. So I got on him and took the knife out of his left eye and shoved it to the right. Then I stabbed him again and again until there was nothing left of his stupid wannabe face but pure carnage. He went limp, and I caught my breath.
All I wanted to do was skip some friggin' rope. So now, you're gonna help me out.
I raised the knife way up high with both hands and stuck it into his gut, then sliced all the way across his belly. I pried open all the skin and fat and exposed all the wonderful organic cordage within. I pulled out a nice long section of his small intestine and severed it with the blade. It was slippery, but it worked. I stood up and found my balance, then started doing what I wanted to do the whole time. Skip rope. Now, don't you believe me when I tell you that skipping rope can make any situation better?
On Halloween night, 1974, 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien went trick-or-treating with his sister, Elizabeth, and 2 other children in Pasadena, accompanied by Timothy's father, Ronald, and another parent. The night started off innocently enough, but would go on to end in tragedy. When the group knocked on one particular door, there was seemingly no one home, and as such, they swiftly moved on. Timothy's father stayed behind for a moment to wait and see if anybody would answer the door. He quickly caught back up with the others, with 5 pixie sticks in his hand, given to him by the homeowner, who was simply taking their time to answer the door. He distributed the candy amongst the children, and later gave the spare one to a child who was not with the group. It began to rain, and as such, they cut their trick-or-treating session short, and the children and their parents went back to their homes. Before bed, Timothy asked his parents if he could dip into his candy collection. They agreed, and young Timothy decided to start with the pixie stick. He poured some of the powdery candy into his mouth, but immediately complained that it tasted unusually bitter. Timothy quickly realized that something was wrong, and he rushed to the bathroom with severe stomach pains. Shortly after, Timothy began to convulse, and within no time at all, went limp in his father's arms. He died as he was being rushed to the hospital. After a pathology report, it was revealed that the pixie sticks had been laced with a poison, a fatal dose of potassium cyanide to be precise. Timothy consumed enough poison to have killed 2 adults. Thankfully, none of the other children in the group had eaten their pixie sticks, though theirs also tested positive for containing lethal amounts of cyanide. The tops of the candy wrappers had been opened, filled with poison, and resealed with a stapler. After the news of Timothy's death spread, there was community uproar, with parents from the surrounding area returning their children's Halloween candy to the police, fearing that a maniac had been handing out poison treats to as many trick-or-treaters as possible, with the sole intention of killing dozens of children. And that's exactly what was believed to have happened by the police, initially at least. The authorities began to grow suspicious of Ronald, Timothy's own father, due to his inability to even recall which house handed out the pixie sticks, despite the fact that he and the children had only visited a handful of houses across 2 streets that evening. Even more strange was the fact that none of the houses that the group had visited that evening had been handing out pixie sticks to trick-or-treaters. Eventually, the truth came to light. Ronald had poisoned the candy himself, and ensured that it ended up being given to all of the children that he had taken out trick-or-treating. His motivation? To collect on various life insurance policies that he had taken out on his son, and presumably his daughter, though, as stated, she never ate her candy. He gave the other children the sweets in order to cover his tracks, and make it appear as if someone else was indiscriminately handing out the poisoned pixie sticks. Turns out that Ronald was over $100,000 in debt, and the life insurance payouts that he was set to receive would have eased his financial woes. Throughout his entire trial, Ronald maintained his innocence, but the amount of evidence pointing towards him as the murderer was too substantial for the jury to ignore. It was revealed that Ronald had been talking to chemists about where he could purchase cyanide and how much would be needed for a lethal dosage. His friends and co-workers also testified that Ronald showed an unusual interest in the poison in the months leading up to Halloween. He was found guilty of murder and 4 counts of attempted murder, and was sentenced to death. While incarcerated, he was despised by his fellow inmates, who condemned him for murdering his own son. Ronald's execution took place on March 31st, 1984, just after midnight. A crowd of demonstrators gathered outside as he died, some even chanting, "Trick or treat." For his heinous crime, Ronald has become known as the man who killed Halloween.
They didn't believe me. They thought I'd snapped. They even found it funny. I bet they regret that now. We've all been given plenty of time to think about it. There was nothing in the air that night that suggested things would turn. It was a night of trick-or-treating just like any other. I had my two friends with me, Steve and Jim. We were rocking our usual low-effort costumes. But early on, we had the idea to split up and hit houses by ourselves, thinking we'd score pity points and more candy by being on our own. We ran off into separate directions and got to it. It was actually working pretty well. I was getting way more from each house than a kid my age would usually get, but I wasn't alone for long. I saw a random kid standing in the middle of the street, not moving, just staring up at a street lamp. He didn't even have a costume. "Hey kid," I called out to him, but he didn't move. So I walked up and clapped my hands on his shoulder. "Hey man." He didn't startle at all, just slowly craned back his neck and flashed me a very disarming smile. "Hey there, buddy. What are you doing on Halloween without a costume, boss?" He finally turned around and shrugged. This is just how I roll every Halloween. Costumes aren't necessary if you've got charm." That innocent smile again. "Well, you're not going to get anything if you just stand out in the middle of the street." "Are you sure about that?" Yeah, pretty sure. Hey, you know what? We're both by ourselves, so why don't we hit some houses together?" "That sounds great, buddy. Let's go." "Hey, wait up. At least tell me your name first." "I'm Sean." He stopped for a moment and looked over his shoulder. "Nice to meet you, Sean. Call me Crane." "Sure thing, Crane." Then we were off. That Crane was a real interesting character. He taught me how to use his charm to get way more candy. "All you need is a genuine smile," he'd say. From that point on, I was raking in the goods like never before. But the strangest thing was, he never took any candy for himself. Nobody even offered any to him. And every time I tried to give him some of mine, he'd decline. "No thanks, Sean. I'm diabetic," he'd say. He was a cool guy for sure, but I was pretty confused as to what he was doing out on Halloween night if he was unable to eat candy as he claimed. But I wasn't going to ask. That seemed too judgmental. After a while, I decided to introduce Crane to my friends and see if they would welcome him into our group. I sent them a selfie of the two of us with the caption, "Met this cool guy Crane." I thought it was weird that they both screenshotted the picture. It wasn't funny or anything, but I just shrugged and took Crane to where my friend said to meet. When I got there, Jim and Steve were nowhere to be found. "Where are these friends of yours, Sean?" "I don't know. They should be around here somewhere. Maybe they're late." "Okay." Crane seemed a little concerned, so I tried to cheer him up. I clapped him on the shoulder again and gave him a reassuring shake. "Don't worry, man. These guys are really cool. They'll like you. We'll all get along really well. Hey, while we're waiting, try and think of some cool things to tell them about yourself, you know?" "Sure thing, buddy." Then, Jim and Steve ran out from the bushes, bursting with laughter, waving their phones around. "What's wrong with you, Sean?" "Dude, have you gone psycho?" They didn't even notice Crane. He was starting to look upset. "What are you guys talking about? Aren't you going to introduce yourselves?" That threw them off balance with laughter. "Oh man, you really are crazy." "Dude, we caught you in 4K talking to yourself. I posted it to Snap, bro." Crane was just standing there. It started to freak me out just a bit, so I went on my phone and looked at Jim's story. There I was in the middle of the street, talking loudly to nobody, my hand on the shoulder of thin air, looking like a totally insane person. "What? I don't understand." Crane? When I looked up, my friends could finally see it. But it wasn't Crane anymore. If you take your young child trick-or-treating, you really have to watch them closely. Especially if you raised a couple of imbeciles like I did. We started just before nightfall because I didn't want them to be around other older hooligan kids who would cause trouble on Halloween. I let them walk ahead of me and run up to the houses while I waited on the sidewalk. I trusted them that much, and I wanted them to feel like they got the full experience without their dad hovering over them. About 2 hours after sundown, I was starting to see the hooligans come out, so I was ready to turn back and head home. Come on, kiddos, let's go home so you can eat all that candy you've piled up. Oh, really? Yep. Can't stay out too much longer or Mom will start to get worried about you. Okay, but can we at least hit some houses on the way back? Sure thing, buddy. So, we started to walk home. To my surprise, we'd ended up wandering into a part of the neighborhood I wasn't super familiar with. I got my phone out and put in the GPS route so we wouldn't get lost, but unfortunately I got a little distracted looking at all the costume photos my PTA friends were posting of their children. Suddenly, I bumped into my kids. Dad, can we trick-or-treat them? My youngest son pointed to a house I'd never seen before. It was set all the way in the back of the lot, as if they traded all their backyard space for a ridiculously long front yard. I couldn't tell if it was supposed to be decorated for Halloween or Christmas, but either way, they'd gone all out. It looked like a life-size gingerbread house with all sorts of candy ornaments, licorice, icing, and candy canes that created a sugary runway straight to the front door. Sure, go ahead. They ran off immediately, so I decided to just wait on the sidewalk. Hey, that one's actually pretty good. I looked up from my phone to see the ugliest old lady I'd ever seen open the door and greet the kids. Don't judge, John, I thought, averting my eyes. Your wife might look like that one day. But when I looked up again, the next thing I saw were my kids walking into the house. What the? I ran up to the door and tried to get in, but it was locked. Hey! I banged on the door like I was trying to beat it down, but no one answered. I was starting to panic, hyperventilating. I peeked in through the window, and what I saw made my heart jump out of my chest. There were metal cages hanging from the ceiling, piles of little bones on the floor, and a coat of garbage and filth over everything else. I scrambled, looking for something to throw through the window. Finally, I picked up a stone from the yard that was painted to look like a peppermint and chucked it through the glass. It didn't fall away as much as I'd hope it would, but I already felt like I was running out of time. I climbed in over the jagged shards, getting cuts in plenty of places I wouldn't like to talk about. Inside, I heard the crackling of a raging fire. I followed the sound to the living room, where the old hag was tending the towering flames in the fireplace, and my kids, the dunces, were already locked up in cages on the floor. They weren't even struggling. Dad? What are you doing here? Just then, the wrinkly hag spooked and jumped up, turning around to face me. Without thinking much of it, I charged and punched her right in the face. She fell back into the fire with a flurry of flames and embers, screaming horridly and rolling on the floor to no avail. She succumbed quickly. Tearing my eyes from the sight, I rushed to my knees and started to undo the locks on the cages. Dad, you're ruining everything! Yeah, now we're not gonna get any candy. I hate you! What did you just say? I hate you! I hate you! Fine. Stay in the cages, and think about what you've done. Wait, Daddy, don't leave! Dad, no! Come back! Get us out! We're sorry, Daddy, please, let us out! We're sorry! Please don't leave us here! Let us out!
People who don't know about my story always ask me why I never go out for Halloween anymore. I tell them the reason is because I'm too old now, but only my boys, Josh and Tyler, really understand. but even they don't know everything. I've barely had the strength to tell anyone in person. Hopefully this will get it off my chest. It started out as a textbook night of hooliganry, with far more tricks than treats on our part. We jumped out of bushes and scared plenty of little kids. We stole about 8 bowls of candy from front porches and played chicken with just about every car that drove past us. Our sacks were bulging with candy, and our heads were even more swollen with ego. Josh was holding his candy sack between his legs.
Now this is how you go trick-or-treating.
Tyler was smart. He was ready to turn in.
We should call it, boys. I don't think we can carry much more. I'd call this a success for the history books. I'm ready to begin the feast.
I had a little more room in my pillowcase, so I was still willing to push my luck.
Come on, guys, one more score. Fine, but just one more. I'm getting tired of hauling around all this loot.
I led them around the corner and hustled down the sidewalk. Then I saw it. The house that would be the reckoning of all the bad karma I'd built up that night.
Look at that, boys! Whoa. Oh, there ain't no way, homie. Nuh-uh.
It looked like a condemned trap house turned haunted murder manor. A winding path of cracked pavement crept up to the front porch, on which there were no signs of life nor candy. But all over the house were obvious signs that this property was meant for the fright of trick-or-treaters. Fake spiderwebs were draped over the windows. A single skeleton lounged in the rocking chair by the door. The lawn was littered with foam tombstones and animatronic creatures of the night. The typical tarantulas, zombie torsos, and rodents of unusual size. But the most unsettling and brazen ornaments of all were the mutilated mannequins skewered on spikes lined up along the path to the door.
I believe we met our match here, boys. Let's go home. Yeah, man, we should really get out of here. Oh my god, you guys are wimps. You know this is all fake.
I don't know how such a boneheaded sense of bravery came over me in that moment, but it stands as one of my life's biggest regrets.
Whatever, I'm going in. You're nuts, dude. For real, you're on your own.
I was already halfway to the porch.
Whatever, just wait for me out here.
I climbed up the creaky steps and examined the skeleton that greeted me. There were fake cockroaches in his lap and in his eye sockets. His bony hands held a sign that read, "Enter, if you dare."
So cheesy.
The front door was heavily splintered, and someone had splattered fake blood all over the handle. Inside, I heard faint screaming and shattering glass, but nothing that couldn't be spooky ambience from hidden speakers. I looked back to my friends. They were already getting bored and digging through their sacks of candy. I had to make it quick. They wouldn't sit around and wait on me forever. When I turned the door handle, the fake blood smeared all over my hand.
Ew, gross.
I pressed on and entered the house. The interior had the same aesthetic. More spiderwebs and fake skeletons. But this time, the rats and cockroaches were real. They scurried around my feet and fled from my presence. I walked as quietly as I could down the long, narrow hallway, but every floorboard creaked and groaned under my weight. Then, I started hearing it. The sound that echoes in my nightmares to this day. Thumping, like someone pounding on wood, and with every strike, a horrible squelching. Followed by a bone-chilling scrape. Thud, squish, scratch. Thud, squish, scratch. My heart started pounding. I wasn't feeling nearly so courageous as before, but I still wasn't ready to give up. I desperately wanted the king-size prize at the end of this terrible hallway, and the fame of fearlessness. The sound grew louder and louder as I approached an open doorway on my left. I knew that was where the sound was coming from. I crept up to the hole in the wall and tried to steel myself, hyping myself up to get the bag and flee. But a light shined through the doorway, casting a shadow on the floor before me. I saw the shape of a man with a long knife in his hand, swinging down his blade again and again in perfect sync with the sound. Thud, squish, scratch. I peeked my head around the corner and peered into the kitchen. I couldn't believe what I saw, but I'll never forget it. There he was, the man with the knife, dressed in a bloody coverall with messy slicked back hair, and a mask that looked like the severed face of his victim. He had the still bleeding corpse of a man on a butcher block, and he was chopping the body to bits. I watched him do it several times, frozen in fear. He slammed the blade into the flesh, slicing through bone and all, spewing blood in every direction. Then, he carefully removed the edge from the wood of the block with one sliding motion. He raised his hand up high, ready to repeat the motion until there was nothing left of his victim. He was focused, methodical. Thud, squish, scratch. This was no run-of-the-mill Michael Myers fanatic. This was him, Michael Myers incarnate, in the flesh and indisputable. The pace and desperation of my breaths became audible. My heart sank as Myers turned his head towards me. This reincarnation of Myers must have been some kind of beast, because the scream that he let out... I saw him step toward me and I bolted, dropping my sack of candy on the floor. I slammed the front door behind me and jumped off the porch. I lost my footing and skidded down the pavement, scraping to a stop right where my friends were sitting on the sidewalk. "Geez, Ken, what got into you?" I clambered to my feet and said only, "Run!" "What?" Just then, Michael kicked down the door and started running towards us at full speed. We dropped everything and split up, sprinting away as fast as humanly possible. Later that night, we met up at my house. I was very happy to see that none of my friends were hurt, but they were pretty upset with me. "Dude, why'd you scare us like that?" "Yeah, you made us drop all the candy we had. If you hadn't spooked us, we'd be eating like kings right now." "Guys, you don't understand, that was real!" "No way, dude. It was just some guy dressed as Michael Myers. He just got you so good you made us think he was real for a second. But come on, all that stuff was fake." "Yeah, man, you said it yourself. You should have just left it alone if you scare so easily." "Come on, guys, you gotta believe me!" "Yeah, we believe you're a wuss." No matter how much I tried to explain to them what I saw, they didn't believe me. But they were still good friends at least, and stayed over at my house for the night as per our original plan. My mom gave us all the candy she had left over from the trick-or-treaters, which almost made up for our lost loot. For a moment, I started to believe them, that this was all fake and I'd gotten thoroughly pranked by some creep loser in a nasty house. But when morning came, our peace was shattered completely. We came out to the living room where the news was playing on the TV. "A terrible tragedy occurred last night in the midst of the Halloween celebration. Police say their main suspect is a man dressed as the popular horror movie villain Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise, who was spotted before sunrise this morning reportedly terrorizing children while armed with a knife." The day was October 21st, just several days shy before Halloween. My anticipation grew higher and higher as I planned to host a Halloween party at my place. I remember setting up a Facebook event and inviting my close friends and coworkers to join the party. My friend Dave would usually be the one to host these kind of events, but unfortunately he couldn't do it this year as his parents were having renovations done at their house. While setting up the event, I didn't take into consideration that my parents were extremely against Halloween festivities. They would always lecture me on why Halloween was a holiday only made for kids who wanted to go to hell and worship the devil. What made things more frustrating was how they kept the same beliefs until now, despite me being in my late teens. One night, I noticed my mom sitting in the living room watching TV. I began to approach her direction while trying to muster up any plausible excuse that would persuade her in the favor of my party idea. I casually hovered over her saying, Hey, Mom. Just in case Dad didn't tell you today, I just wanted to say that you look very beautiful.
What the hell do you want, George?
What?
You're not usually this nice. So spit it out, whatever you have to say.
Can I invite my friends over for Halloween this year?
Get the hell out of my face.
I remember heading to my bedroom while pouting under my breath on how I was living such an unfair life. I sat in front of my computer and began sulking for the remainder of the night as I messaged the bad news to my friend Dave. As I embarrassingly addressed the issue, Dave responded back by suggesting that we purchase an Airbnb instead of hosting the party at someone's house. I thought it was a pretty smart idea, so we mutually agreed to get an Airbnb that was located somewhere more secluded and away from the suburban part of town. Feelings of excitement began exuberating throughout my body, as I couldn't help but feel exhilarated at the notion that I didn't have to deal with my parents' incompetence. Fast forward to October 31st and it was officially Halloween. I began driving towards the Airbnb destination about an hour or two after check-in, just so I could prep before the guests arrived. As I got closer to the destination, I remember seeing a decent-sized house that looked a tad run down. It didn't look like there were any other houses around, just a lot of tall trees and a scent of pine cones in the air. I figured it would add to the spooky ambiance considering this was Halloween. As I got inside, I immediately started setting up for the party while having a few glasses of alcohol on the side. A couple hours later, the sun was finally beginning to set, which meant that the guests were on their way to the party. I figured I'd dress as Georgie from the movie It, as my name was George, so pun intended. I texted and called my friend Dave, but unfortunately didn't get a response. I speculated that everyone was either unable to find the correct address or was just going to show up to this party fashionably late. That's when the living room TV begins to abruptly turn on. I then saw a bizarre message playing on the TV, as if it came straight out of the movie The Purge saying,
"This is not a test. This is your emergency broadcast system announcing the commencement of the annual purge sanctioned by the US government. Weapons of Class 4 and lower have been authorized for use during the purge. All other weapons are restricted. Government officials..."
What the hell is going on? I turn the TV off and immediately hear a knock coming from the front door. I opened the door and saw some kids shout, "Trick or treat!" Sorry guys, no candy here today.
You suck, and wearing a raincoat isn't a costume, cheapskate.
I'm dressed as Georgie, you idiot! I slammed the door shut and began to hammer down another drink. That's when I heard another knock at the door. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away! I'm not handing out any candy, you stupid kids! I angrily approached the door and looked through the peephole, only to see a group of people wearing purge masks while holding machetes. At first glance, I thought it was the guests from the party, but then I heard one of the guys say, "Maybe we can go through the backyard and take him out there." My heart began to submerge into my stomach. I turned off all the house lights and simultaneously darted across the living room to make sure that the backyard sliding door was locked. As I secured the lock handle, one of the purgers slammed his hand on the glass door while yelling, "Open the door, Georgie! Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops!" That's when I grabbed a large blade from the knife set on the kitchen counter and ran towards the bedrooms. I then saw a red balloon hovering above the ground. I couldn't tell if I was hallucinating or not from the belligerent state that I was in. Nonetheless, I plowed through the hallway and locked myself in one of the bedrooms. As I glanced through the blinds of the bedroom window, I saw someone dressed as Pennywise dancing psychotically while staring in my direction. I heard nothing but the sound of my heart throbbing vigorously through my chest cavity. That's when I hear the closet door open behind me. I couldn't move a single muscle as I was honestly petrified to turn around. I then felt a soft tap on my shoulder with someone saying, "Hey, Georgie." Ah! How the hell did you get in here? You want a balloon, Georgie? What? Here, take it. Take it. Get away from me, clown! You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too!
That's when the clown's mouth abnormally opens wide and begins to swallow my entire head. I felt like my life was slowly diminishing. Through my drunken haze, I dug the kitchen blade into the stomach of the clown despite not being able to see a thing. I could feel the hand that was digging at the clown's stomach become wet from the blood being shed everywhere. I then opened my eyes and realized that the mouth that was supposedly swallowing my head was none other than a brown paper bag being held by my friend Dave. Happy Halloween! Ah!